Welcome to Throwing the Jab with your host Willie Needham, where you can learn to use those hard-hitting questions as a means to share the gospel with your neighbor. Alright, well, welcome back to Throwing the Jab, where you can learn how to take these hard-hitting questions that you encounter in sharing your faith and turn it into a powerful opportunity to share the gospel with your neighbor. So, my friend Jim Harold presented me with a series of questions regarding the Bible and everything in it. Well, I wouldn't really say the Bible and everything in it, but the Bible and the ability to trust it. See, in the grand, centuries-old Christian versus atheist debate, it always ends up coming down to what evidence is there that the Bible is true? Or what evidence is there that the Bible isn't true? So for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be addressing simple responses to various objections and questions regarding the Bible and its authority as the Word of God. So the first one I'm going to really start out with is, how do you know the Bible is true? Now, usually questions about being able to believe the Bible, I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. It's usually a bluff. A lot of people who ask this question, not everybody, but a lot of people who ask this question have not even read the Bible. Or maybe they have and they just did like a, okay, here's the Bible. Random thing. Okay. Let's see. They sing to the tambourine and harp and rejoice to the sound of the flute. Well, it's just a bunch of nonsense. I give up. It must all be garbage. A lot of times, that's how people form their opinion of the Bible. They just pick it up, they do a Bible roulette sort of thing, and the first thing they read, they just go, pish, posh, and poppycock. So, when people make any sort of objection to the Bible, especially if they attempt to put any kind of authority behind it, or assertion behind the objection, you gotta understand a lot of them are bluffing. So, to see whether they're bluffing, you gotta call it. So what you gotta do is, first of all, ask them, what do you know about the Bible? Now ask it in a very kind way. Can't really be confrontational about it at this point. You can't just be like, well, what do you know about the Bible? No. You ask them in a very civil manner, all right, well, what is your understanding of the Bible? Because you never know, they may have been a seminary dropout, turned atheist. So they may have actually studied the Bible in depth. Or they may be an atheist who was raised in a religious family. Or they might just be an atheist from an atheist family. It happens. So you always got to start out by addressing what they really need to hear first. Because that's a very, very important thing. Before you just start spouting off evidence of ancient manuscripts and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Latin Vulgate. That's a very dangerous position to get yourself into. In boxing terms, to go with the purely intellectual, evidential approach in an evangelism conversation is what you call leading with your head. And really, when you're speaking about the intellect, you are still leading with the head. When really the heart of the person's objection to the Bible is a heart issue. See, the issue is not really a matter of intellect despite their claims to be intellectual in being skeptical of the Bible, the issue with the Bible that they're having is a matter of their heart. So find out what their upbringing is. So most of the time, like I said, a lot of them are just going to say that they get the Bible roulette, or even worse, they're just kind of parroting back whatever their source of influence has told them. Like their college professor who they really look up to, where they haven't necessarily looked into it themselves. And for those people who haven't really looked into it, or haven't looked into it thoroughly, the best way to go about it is just, all right, get into the Bible. Just read it. I dare you. Dare them to read the Bible. It's the Word of God. You really can't go wrong with it. You have to try hard to not get anything out of it after reading the entire Bible. So secondly, you're going to get to the people who have actually read the Bible all the way through, or at least they claim they have. Once again, you might have a bluff on your hands. So, call the bluff. And I use Songs of Solomon. I don't even have to reference any passage about it. But if you've read Songs of Solomon, you know that it's something that really sticks in your mind after a while. And I'm not even going to give the hint away as far as what is so interesting about that book. But I think it was in there to see if we're really paying attention. But you just got to bring something up that would have actually caught their attention if they actually read the Bible all the way through. So it's really just kind of calling their bluff. Always go back to make sure that you have an understanding of where they're coming from. Now finally, once you've gotten to the point where you've figured out where they're coming from, you've called any kind of bluffs that may or may not be there, and you're left with the people who have actually read it and are able to give a proper answer regarding Songs of Solomon in all of its uniqueness. The best way to go about it well, how do you know the Bible's not just a book of silliness? Well, it is a historical account. In fact, it is a compilation of many historical accounts over the course of approximately 1,500 years, approximately 40 different people in different walks of life. They weren't all just a bunch of silly little Jewish peasants. In fact, very few of them were. In fact, some of them weren't even Jewish. But you have kings, you have army generals, you have priests who were very highly educated. And, most importantly, you have people who lived with Jesus. And all these people are doing is they're taking what they have seen and what they have heard and writing it down. You see, when you're on the job, if somebody tells you something extremely important, what do? Write it down, right? I mean, sure, you may have your fancy little tablet. Who uses both their thumbs for tablets anymore? But the point is, you make a note of it. You write it down somehow. Why? Because it's important, and you want to make sure that the information is preserved. So these men, and maybe even a couple of women, but the people who wrote the Bible, they were writing down what they had seen and what they had heard. And they did their absolute best to make sure that that information is preserved so that you and I, thousands of years later, could actually read it and understand it. So that, my friends, is one way to respond. Actually, it's really three ways, but before you go with the one way, you gotta set these other things up. But those are some ways to respond to when people have an objection to the Bible. And what's always very important, never forget the fact that you need to press forward in with sharing the gospel. So why would these people find it to be so important? Well, you look in the Bible and you'll find out the reward for those who are saved by God's grace and the consequences of those who die in their sins. And that, my friends, is where you can start addressing the personal sin in the non-believer's life, and you can make it for a very effective gospel presentation. So thank you all for watching this week's episode of Throwing the Jab. No one is unsavable. All you have to do is do your part to share the message of the gospel to this lost and dying world. Preach with conviction and grace. And remember, most importantly, fight until the bell rings.